this card work? I'm not really sure.
How is your progress coming along?
What do you want?
I recommend to you to keep your tongue if you know what's good for you.
You've been keeping me here for around a week. At the very least, you can tell me, what do you want from me?
I will. In a little while. But first let me know the progress you made about researching the fusion spells.
Fusion, the oldest mechanic in the entire game. While back in the day we only had polymerization, today every respectable fusion archetype has its own related fusion spell. And in today's list, I decided that it will be kind of fun to look at the top 10 best fusion spells in the entire game. However, before we begin, two particular rules. Rule number 1. The fusion spell of the archetype must be polymerization-like. That means it has to be a fusion spell by itself and at least fusing 2 monsters from ever, but it has to use at least 2 materials, not including itself, making it up to 3. Secondly, the rule that I'm going to take on a particular fusion spell, which might going to be looking weird, but because if I will not, it's probably going to be the best one, and the one I'm talking about is Brilliant Fusion, because let's be honest, Brilliant Fusion in terms of archetypal fusion spells, probably the best one.
Also, it's banned, so yeah, I think that's another good reason to kind of exclude it from the list.
Without further ado, let us jump right into the top 10 best fusion archetypal spells of all time. Number 10. Coming out at the bottom of the list is Redeyes Fusion. While some people of you are going to probably disagree and saying this should be a little bit higher, I am not going to put this higher because of Dragoon and Anaconda. Even though those 2 cards kind of making this a little bit better, but Anaconda is only making this better because you're using it from the deck, and I'm hoping Dragoon will never reach the TCG, but that is a discussion for another time. The reason why Redeyes Fusion is on the bottom of the list, it's because it's restricting you for the turn from normal or special summoning any monster except from the fusion monster you summoned. While it's pretty nice that in letting you fusion summon monsters from the deck, its own archetype kind of stopped using it. So, while Redeyes Fusion is pretty nice, it does have a lot of restrictions, and it's kind of landing itself at the bottom of the list. Number 9. Coming up next is Neos Fusion. Neos Fusion, in my opinion, is a better fusion spell in terms of vacuum than Redeyes Fusion, because it's only restricting you for special summoning for the rest of the turn. And it lets you fusion summon any Neos Fusion that require 2 materials by sending the materials from your deck and ignoring the summoning conditions. While that's not also enough, it also have a nice protection effect for elemental hero Neos by the ability of stopping the fusion monster of shuffling itself during the end phase by, well, banishing the fusion spell from the graveyard. And that is amazing because this is exactly what the archetype kind of needed. Once again, it's not that amazing compared to the other picks on the list, but it does give the archetype what it needed, and I suspect that in Master Rule 5, with the ability to access a little bit more fusion, Neos might going to find itself a little bit higher in the tier list. Probably going to be around tier 3 still, but not that bad as it is right now. Number 8. Alright, for number 8, I have 2 options for this one. Fusion of Fire and I Love Fusion. While it looks like a weird pick, both of these kind of serving the same purpose. While I Love Fusion kind of a little bit more restrictive, requiring you to control an Ignister monster to pretty much be able to use a Link monster your opponent control as part of the fusion material, both of them kind of serve in the same purpose. A mini kind of super polymerization, which able to, well, fusion summon for them the archetypal related fusion monster. While both of these kind of don't really see any more play, or any play at all, These two are just, in my opinion, could land a number 8 because they're just mini super polymerizations, and that's, in my opinion, good enough. Number 7. Alright, so next up coming a fusion spell from an archetype that's not really used for fusioning that much anymore, but unlike the rest of the list, it doesn't really have a restriction, and it also have kind of benefit if you're playing it in the fusion way. And the one that I'm talking about is Redeyes Fusion. Redeyes Fusion allow you to fusion summon normally, but if your opponent control a monster from the extra deck, you can also use a Redeyes monster from your extra deck as a fusion material, as well from the deck, but the one that you mostly care about is the extra deck, which kind of letting you to skip the entire requirement and fusion summon a Leo Dancer immediately, which is ridiculous, let's say that. But like I said again, this is a fusion spell that doesn't really being used by its archetype because it's mostly used for an Xyz or Link engine right now, Lunalites as you know them around, but if you are going to go into more of a fusion build, it's a little bit more consistent to use than the rest. And I think because of that, that is not being used in its own archetype, but still very consistent if you use it, it's right there in the correct place at number 7. Number 6. So, this pick might going to be a little bit controversial, but for number 6 option, we have Ancient Gear Fusion. And let me explain. Ancient Gear Fusion is just like any other fusion spell. You fusion summon from your extra deck a fusion of Ancient Gear by using monster from your hand or field as a fusion material, right? But it has the added benefit of, if you control an Ancient Gear Golem or Ancient Gear Golem Ultimate Pound, to use the entire materials except itself that you use on the field, send all the rest of the materials from your deck, to then immediately after use Overload Fusion to summon another Chaos Giant. Now, again, it might sound a little bit weird why this is number 6. Well, while it's not as good as the rest of the picks on this list, Ancient Gears could bring out pretty consistently if Catapult doesn't get stopped Ancient Gear Golem into the field, and it's pretty much easy to do so. If you're able to bait your opponent and you're able to get this off, yeah, it's pretty much cannot be stopped. And you're getting a 4500 monster that then you can use Overload Fusion to summon another one. And because of that, I think this is a good place for it. Not in the top 5, but at the top of the bottom top 10. So, that is my explaining, and I hope you guys will understand that. Number 5. Coming in at number 5, it's probably a blast from the past. Miracle Fusion, and let's just throw also its dark counterpart, Dark Calling. Miracle Fusion says that you can fusion summon an elemental hero fusion monster by banishing cards from your field or graveyard. And Dark Calling does the same thing, however, instead of banishing from the field, it's banished from the hand. While those particular two fusion spells not look like something special, and they don't really have a name for themselves to be searched by their own archetypes, today we have two particular monsters that kind of change that. I'm talking about Sunriser and about Ajaster Gold. And because of that, and because heroes kind of became their own archetype by themselves, this two fusion spells kind of became part of the archetype. And really essential combo pieces. And because of that, and now that they're a little bit more searchable, and very much used, and also because of nostalgia, I think this will be a really good place for them to land head first at the top 5. Number 4. Coming in at number 4, we have Thunder Dragon Fusion, which is a part of a fusion archetype that its main boss monster got hit on the recent ban list. For a good reason. But the reason this fusion spell is so high on the list, because by itself, it's a really good fusion spell. And it's not only for Thunder Dragon, it's for any Thunder archetype out there that have fusions. While currently right now we don't have any, as it stands right now, it's still a very good spell. Thunder Dragon Fusion allow you to shuffle from your graveyard, field, or banish pile back into the deck in order to fusion summon any Thunder Fusion monster you wish. And in the turn after it was sent to the graveyard, it's allow you to banish it and add to your hand a Thunder monster, any you wish, from your deck to your hand. Well, today it's probably not the best fusion spell around because the deck itself is not that good, and there are 3 additional options that are a little bit better than it. Thunder Dragon Fusion is still a pretty decent fusion spell, and I have a feeling that it might go to see play again in the future. Number 3. Coming in at number 3 is our third and final duo, but this time from the same archetype, and I'm talking about Shaddoll and Shaddoll fusions. Now, do I really need to explain what those 2 fusion spells do? Well, the reason why those 2 are so high is because Shaddoll Fusion, if your opponent controls a monster, it lets you fusion someone from the deck. And Shaddoll Fusion allows you to OTK by itself, and because every single fusion monster, not including the new one, in the Shaddoll archetype, love to be sent to the graveyard to then recycle for you a fusion spell, this is a really powerful effect. The only reason why this is at number 3 and not higher for both of these is because they're both a hard ones per turn. But Shaddoll Showdown already showed you that Shaddoll at full power can use those 2 fusion spells for very much good reason. And there was a good reason why Shaddoll Fusion was on the limited list for a very long time. Number 2. For number 2 we have a fusion spell that is very versatile, and I'm talking about Metal Foes Fusions. While Metal Foes Fusion itself is not really that special, because it's allowing you to fusion someone from your hand or field, the graveyard effect is the one that matters. If you shuffle it back into your deck, you get to draw a card. And I still see up to this day some particular decks putting Foolish Burial Goods to then sometimes send Metal Foes Fusion to the graveyard to shuffle it into the deck and get to draw a card. It's pretty nice, but because of the archetype not being that consistent or good anymore, and because the fusion spell kind of giving you just a draw, it's not really that spectacular, I think it's only landed at number 2, but it's still very, very respectable. And with this as number 2, I'm pretty sure you already guessed number 1. Number 1. Like I said, for number 1 it's probably a guessed choice, and for number 1 I have Invocation. Invocation is probably the best archetypal fusion spell, and I'm going to explain why. First off, if you want to fusion summon any fusion monster, you can fusion summon any of them by just using the monsters correct in your hand. However, if you're trying to use it for fusion summoning an invoked monster, you also have access to the field, banishing from there, and from both players' graveyard, which is insane. You not only have the access into your graveyard, making this a little bit of a miracle fusion, you also have the ability to access your opponent's graveyard. And with that not enough, you're also able to shuffle this spell from your graveyard to your deck to retrieve Alistair the Invoker, to then in the next turn normal summon him again, to then get Invocation again. And Invocation is also not a hard once per turn. The only hard once per turn effect is the shuffling effect. Do you really think that there is any fusion spell that is better than this? I don't think so. Recursion, the fact that you can use it for any archetype as long as you use from the hand, really overpowered Miracle Fusion for its own archetype? Yeah, I don't think there's any fusion spell that can top this, at least in my opinion. If you guys think anything else is better than this, let me know in the comments down below, but for my pick, in my opinion, Invoked Fusion is the best one. And there you have it. This is, in my opinion, the top 10, well, kind of top 10, but yeah, top 10 best fusion archetype spells in the entire game. Alright, Alistair, what exactly do you want from me now? Because we're done with this.
Very good. You did quite well, and I'm not surprised to see that Invocation, my fusion spell, is in the top of the list.
So, are you finally willing to tell me what this is all about?
Very well. You deserve to know that much. Long ago, I was a strong and powerful magician, and I had a very powerful form that a lot of other magicians were all jealous about. They thought me as a threat, and with all their power combined, they were able to separate me from it and created the form to be my tower of prison. But I was able to escape, and now I'm going to get that power again.
Wait. I thought Invoker of Madness was your final form.
Do you really think a link form is the final for a fusion master like me? Well, I'll not deny the usability of that form, and it did serve me very much for a while. I will be finally able to go back to my true fusion form. Thank you for your help, and with a little bit more from you, we'll be able to open up the fusion gate and get me the power that I need back.
That is bad. That is really bad.
No, that is not good at all.